Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode in the series Conversations with Shelly. For those of you joining me for the first time, I am Shelly. And for those of you who've been here for some time now, welcome back. Thank you so much for always sticking and staying and for being a part of this conversation and for being a part of this movement. So, this week, I intend to speak about something that have, settled within my mind for some time. Um, and I've been a little bit wanting to dive, deeper into it ever since I read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, I read that book many, many years ago, and I recently came across it along my catalog of books that I have read over time. And as one of my 2026 goals or, aspirations, I want to again, just increase my knowledge in terms of reading varying books from different genres. So it so happened that I was going through my list and I noticed that I had that all on my list. But then I thought to myself, but I'm sure I read this book already. Of course, with old age, we sometimes forget, the knowledge gleaned, from certain things that we initially got insight from. So of course I looked among my stuff and I realized that I had indeed read the text already. I had indeed read the text already. So it was something for me to revisit. Anyway, I often read um, with very heightened intention. Like I don't just read for reading's sake. I usually don't read for pleasure. I usually read with the intent of taking certain themes and certain schemas, certain points, and I would always make my little notes, my little jottings, my highlights, and I will go back and look at the history and foundation and historical context within which any of this is taking place. So you can just imagine, for me, reading is usually something very clinical and very systematic. That being said, I was very happy when I took up The Richest Man in Babylon and I realized it was highlighted, it was notes were made in the corners, so I didn't have to reread the text in order to refresh my memory. So what I took now from the text is what I'm about to drop within your spirits and within your soul. So the question that I want to pose this week is, why do the rich remain rich? Yeah. And this is something that for many of us, we tend to often not understand for more reasons than one, because in more of our everyday scenarios, more of our everyday lives, we tend to not focus on what the rich focus on. It's usually something that we see as a part of our day-to-day activity. So we're not putting that much, you know, strategic focus as the rich tend to do. And that is one of the key principles that I took away from the text, you know. So what I wanted to do was to give you a core angle as to what it is that this topic is intended to do. And one of the things that its aim is to show you that the rich remain rich because they have a strategic focus to how they manage and acquire wealth. So it's not just about working hard, it's really about systems, mindset, access, and as I said, a strategic focus. So the first thing I want us to look into when it comes to understanding why the rich remain rich is the fact that they own assets, not just income. Now that's the first thing that I got again as part of this theme that continues to play out in the text, the richest man in Babylon. They own assets, not just income, right? So the wealthy, they prioritize ownership. They try to engage themselves into business. They try to own stocks. They try to own real estate in the form of investment. They allow their assets to generate money while they are even sleeping. Now, what will happen for these um, individuals, or what I consider to be the wealthy amongst us, is that their owners will multiply their money versus what we do when we sit in a place of not owning, right? So if you were to ask yourself, if I stop working tomorrow, does my money stop too? And that is something that the rich often put themselves in a position, that strategic position, where their money continue to work for them. So one of the things that is obvious amongst the not so wealthy is that we rely a lot on income. We rely on owning assets that don't generate wealth for us. We will spend our money in places that the assets we tend to acquire tend to depreciate in value, while the rich, their assets appreciate in value. So another thing outside of them owning assets and not just owning an income is that they understand leveraging. They understand what it means to get in a place where it's not just about being in debt. It's using other people's money, other people's skills, systems, and networking to help build their already existing wealth. Another very important strategic thing that I've observed from the text and just in understanding the wealthy is that they protect their money differently. Unlike those among us who are not so wealthy, we will protect our money by putting it in a bank, just having it there as savings. We're not investing. We're not finding ways to put our wealth in things that are strategic and engaging in that kind of risk diversification, right? A lot of us that are not so wealthy, we're afraid of taking that risk. But with risk, it allows you to be able to do more with what you have, as opposed to sitting and allowing those small increments to build. So, how do the wealthy amongst us protect their money in a different kind of a way? They will engage into estate and trust planning. They will talk about strategic investment. They will buy properties. They will re inject income into that property to turn it into something that is income generating. It's not just about making money for them, it's about keeping it, right? They also think about things that are long term. They think about generational wealth, generational planning. They don't think about instant gratification. They don't think about that Mercedes Benz that they need to own. They don't think about having the nicest cars or you know, the most expensive clothes. They don't think about wearing the most expensive jewelry. What they do is they often delay gratification. So the things that will often cause us to be poor are the things that they delay because they know that that instant gratification is exactly that. It is instantaneous. It goes, right? So they will delay gratification in order for that long-term planning. That in many of these instances, they tend to compound over decades and then thereby allowing them to build a legacy and not just a lifestyle. What do we see amongst the middle class and the poor amongst us? They tend to want to focus a lot on immediate consumption, something that is immediately happening. They talk about things that are going to elevate their status. So a lot of the middle class and the poor will tend to focus on status purchases, survival mode decisioning, not something that is long term, but something that is for immediate gratification. Now, another thing that I observed amongst a lot of the wealthy, and also that which the book highlights and tries to resonate in its thematic kind of a way, is the idea about access and information. Now, a lot of us that fall within this low income or middle income bracket are persons that don't want to, or don't have access to, or don't try to gain access to information. They remain somewhat financially illiterate from as, you know, early as they start to actually gain some form of income or some form of, source of funds. The idea about gaining access or information is that they tend to ensure that there's exposure to real business conversations from early on. And a lot of their conversations are not just about, again, things that are going to add to that instantaneous gratification, that moment of adrenaline. It is something that they engage in at a very serious and business focused level. There's always going to be their need and desire to want to access places, people, spaces that allow them to network and allow an additional door to be open. And they always want to find somebody that has made it ahead of them that can guide and mentor and teach them the way how. In a lot of instances, what I have observed is that a lot of persons who are in the low income or middle income bracket, we don't want to network. We don't want to be in those places, those spaces. We don't want to be around those people that will open that door and will give us that additional information, that knowledge that will get us to where our money work for us. And sometimes, in most cases than not, it's really not about the effort that you put in, but it's about the exposure. Exposing yourself to information, exposing yourself to access, exposing yourself to that individual that will get you on that next step on that ladder on your way up. Again, another thing that I have observed and observed very clearly amongst the wealthy is that they take calculated risk. They're wealthy and their wealth is something that they ensure that they understand it clearly. Now, in some instances, there is always going to be that need to learn fast, to try again, to better strategize. But whatever it is, and however you tend to want to do it, don't allow the fear to keep you stuck. Just understand the risk, calculate the risk, because there's oftentimes a greater reward, right? So, for a lot of us, these are things that we often don't realize when we look at the haves and the haves not. But one thing that I've often even seen within my own circle, within my own space, is that for many of the persons with real wealth, they'd never buy into commercialism. And that is something that I have observed. They don't need to have the latest of anything. They will have a pair of Levi's jeans, a pair of Dockers shorts, and they'll wear that until there's holes in it because that is not what is important to them. But a lot of those of us who are falling not within that bracket, we want to have the latest of everything to wear, and that is where our money keeps evading us. Now, if you look at this whole aspect of commercialism, which I've spoke about before, in this capitalist world that we live in, advertising, advertisement, they are designed to separate you from your money. Don't be fooled by that. Because in lots of cases, those that are wealthy aren't mesmerized. They're not, they don't fall into this trauma. They don't fall into this fantasy of getting the newest gadget or the newest thing to elevate who they are, right? And what is happening to a lot of us is that we tend to not understand our worth without things. And for many of us, having things gives us validation. It puts us in a place where we believe for once in our lives we were worth something. So you will want to upgrade your phone every year the latest model comes in. You'll want to always have the fastest, the newest cars, not because it's going to add value to your already existing wealth, but because you want to impress someone, oftentimes a stranger. They don't fall into this ideology of buying designer labels because status is not where their strategic focus is. And one thing for certain that I've observed about the wealthy, they never do emotional shopping. Whenever something is not right, whenever there's emotional distress, whenever there's anxiety, whenever there's something that is leading them emotionally, that's when they put down the wallet. That's when they put down the credit cards. Because the wealthy often buy assets before they incur liability. They will delay a lifestyle upgrade for many, many years, and they will absolutely avoid trend giving spending. They won't get into this trend of spending, and they certainly, when they do spend, it is oftentimes very strategic and very little emotionally driven. So, if it is that you are chasing status, let us sit in the silence of that for a little bit and let us build substance. Many self made, wealthy individuals, they drive modest cars, they live below their means, they avoid unnecessary debts, and they certainly focus on ownership instead of appearance. So, if any of what I have said resonated with you and it makes you reconsider a lot of the things that you have done or have been doing that you may need to rethink about, feel free to drop me a comment, a line, share, subscribe, and of course, turn on your notification bells for when next I drop another in this thought provoking series with Conversations with Shelly.